Okay, so that was that FRQ. That was done. We finished that one. So now here's another one, and this one has a picture. Sometimes the pictures are useful, sometimes they're just kind of there, and they're not super necessary. And so this one says the zebra mussel, a mollusk native to Eurasia, was first discovered in the Great Lakes of North America in 1988. Zebra mussels attach to solid substrates and are filter feeders. Adult zebra mussels can survive for several days or even weeks out of water if the temperature and humidity are favorable. An adult female zebra mussel can produce as many as 1 million eggs a year. One second. The recent range of occurrence of zebra mussels in the United States is indicated by the shading in the map above. So they're basically showing you where zebra mussels are located right now. So this one is going to probably be some stuff about endangered species, which I try to pick like biodiversity, that kind of stuff for this one today, because that's kind of what you guys are studying this week. So now they're asking, why are zebra mussels located primarily in the eastern United States instead of the west? So let's go back to the article. It says the zebra mussel, a mollusk native to Eurasia, was first discovered in the Great Lakes of North America in 1988. Okay, so where are the Great Lakes? Like up in this area-ish, right? So if that's where they were first discovered, why do you think they're mostly in the eastern United States and not in the west? Exactly, because that's where they were introduced. So in this one, we could say, you know, they were introduced in and have not yet made it to the West Coast. Okay. So that's all you have to say for that one. So that one is they kind of gave you the answer for that one, luckily. Now it says, how are zebra mussels introduced into isolated lakes? Describe one viable method for preventing the spread of zebra mussels into isolated lakes. So we need to do two things in here. We need to say how, and then we need to say we need a viable method for preventing the zebra mussels. Okay, so what is one way that you think maybe a zebra mussel could get introduced into a lake? And this happens with a lot of invasive species, not just the zebra mussel. They get introduced into lakes for a few main reasons. If you don't know them, that's okay. You can say I don't know. But if you do, you can mention one. And if you don't, I'll give it to you. I guess I used to study invasive species. Okay, that's totally okay. I used to study invasive species, so I guess I have an upper hand. So the big reason why aquatic invasive species get introduced into lakes and things like that is because there's a few reasons. They can be on a boat. Like for example, like you could have an invasive weed in one lake, or an invasive something in one lake, and then it could get on your boat, and then you can go to a different lake, and now you've taken that thing to the other lake. There is a plant, it's called hydroa, and it literally you only need like one little leaf of that plant. If one little leaf goes from one to the other, it's gonna get in a new lake. I had an invasive species professor once, and she brought us some hydroa to look at, and she like kept it in like 2 Ziploc bags because she like did not want it to get out. So if you have a little bit of that on your boat and you go to a different lake that doesn't have it, bam, that lake now has that. The other thing is there's something called ballast in boats, and boats have like a specific way they like to sit in the water. And so when they are weighed down with things, my pen is not working. When they are weighed down with things, they they sit like specifically in the water, and so they're designed to be full of weight because they're like transport ships, and they usually like taking things back and forth, delivering goods and things like that. So when they're going to their destination, they're usually like full of stuff, but then when on their way home, sometimes they don't have anything in there, so they have these areas called ballast where they just take up water from the local area and put it in the boat. That way the boat sits low like it's supposed to in the water, and then when they get to the place that they're, back to where they're from, and they need to reload with more products, they'll eliminate that ballast. They'll release that ballast from their boat into the water of the new place. And so if there were any critters or any larvae or anything like that in that water from the old place, now that all those critters are in the new place, and if they can survive, they will, and they'll spread. So that may not be why the zebra mussel, because that's an isolated lake, but that's why some other different types of invasive species came. And then also we could talk about maybe their larvae were on a boat and then they got to a different, on a bird, and then they got to the different lake and it fell off, or maybe they built a canal between two lakes and now the water from those two lakes mix. So all of those could be reasons why zebra mussels could be introduced into a lake. So we could say, I'll just do the first one. I'll say a boat with zebra mussels on it went from one lake to carrying the mussel. With it. Okay, and then now we need to say how we're going to prevent this. So the big thing, like for this one especially, is what they do is they're starting to have like check stations when you leave certain waterways, and they want you to completely wash off your boat, or they'll inspect your boat after you pull it out of the water, to make sure that you don't have any, like for example, if you were in the salt water and you wash off your boat and you get all, then most likely the critters will die or they'll dry out. But like if you're going from like lake hopping or whatever, you may not notice that you've got, even on your trailer, right? It could get on your boat trailer because when you're backing that, it's going in the water. So they'll inspect or like wash off your boat. So you can say like some places with the ballast, they've talked about they put like filters on the ballast. So when they bring it in, they bring that water in, and there's like a filter so the organisms can't get in. That's one of the things that they've suggested for that. They've also some places that don't have any endangered species or any invasive species in them, they actually don't they'll just won't have any boat ramps, so they won't let any boats come into that lake because that lake is clean and they know that it's clean. So stuff like that. Now we want to explain one impact zebra mussels can have on an aquatic organism. So you may not know that much about zebra mussels, but they did mention something in the very first slide, which we'll go back to it, about the zebra mussels, which may give us a reason as to why they're causing problems. Okay, so in here, they at least gave us a hint. They said an adult female zebra mussel can produce as many as 1 million eggs per year. Okay, so that's huge, right? That's a lot of babies. Okay, so we could talk about, we could say that because they produce so many babies, we could say because there's so many they produce so many babies, there's a lot of, they're displacing native mussels, or you can even go in the opposite direction. One thing that mussels and clams and things like that, oysters, they are filter feeders. And so they actually take the water into their bodies and they take all the yucky out of it and they spit it back out again. So one thing that they've noticed is that these lakes actually are clearer than they used to be because the zebra mussels are eating all the yucky stuff. So you could, they didn't say it has to be a positive or a negative impact. They just said an impact. So as long as you can ID and explain something, you're good to go. But if you don't know that much about zebra mussels, I would go back to that little blurb below the map and I would say, okay, lots of babies. What could be a problem with lots of babies? And you could say that they displace native, mussels or something like that. So you could say because the mussels produce so many babies, I'll say eggs. That's a little more science friendly. Okay. I'm going to see if that is enough, if they like that and think that's enough. Okay, so that would basically our thing. So displacing native organisms, and just to be safe, just to make sure I get my point on this one, I'm going to say reducing native mussel populations. Just so I really spelled it out for them, because I want to make sure I get my point. And that would definitely earn your point. But again, it's like, like a sentence or two. You don't have to write like a long paper or anything because, you don't have a lot of resources. You're kind of pulling it all out of your head in the middle of the AP exam. You can't like research anything. So hopefully, let's see, I think we have a little more. Okay, yeah. So identify another invasive species, either terrestrial or aquatic, and describe an impact it has had. So you need to know an invasive species, at least one or two, for your AP exam. You don't need to know every invasive species that has ever existed. I don't know every invasive species that have ever existed. But, you can mention, there's a couple different things. One that's pretty common in Georgia is kudzu. I see that like all the time around my house. Another one that people like are the lionfish. It's a pretty common one. And actually, zebra mussel. I mean, we can't use zebra mussel for this one, but these are probably the most common one that they talk about. And so we can talk about what they've done. The kudzu mothered native vegetation. Now this you'd have to write as a sentence. I just realized we had like 8 minutes left, and I have like one or two more parts left, so I'm trying to go fast. The lionfish is a voracious predator. So it like eats native populations. And then we've talked the zebra mussel to death almost in this one. So that's, just know a couple invasive species. You don't have to like know all of them that ever existed. Like they've got all sorts of ones on here, like pigeons and nutria and emerald ash borer. I don't even know what that is. It looks like it eats trees. So now they say one strategy for controlling an invasive species has been to introduce another non-native species to control it. And this strategy can have unintended results. And give a specific example of the use of this strategy and discuss a negative impact of introducing a non-native species to control an invasive species. So, unfortunately, this one they want a specific one. So, they want you to talk about a specific time this has happened, and then they want you to discuss a negative impact. So I'm just going to read you the main ones. They have insects to feed on purple loosestrife, ladybugs basically to feed on pest insects, parasitoid wasps to control weevils, bacteria to control animal pests, the mongoose to hunt rats, and then the big one that they talk about a lot is the cane toad to prey on insects. And then there's another one that they don't even mention on the rubric, but it's my favorite. There is a jelly, and it's called Nemiopsis, Mnemiop. It's a comb jelly, and it was released into the Black Sea, I believe, the Black or the Baltic, and it was just like eating everything. There was like nothing left in there. The fisheries were all gone. It was like eating all the fish. And so they released its predator, which is named Varroa. I believe there's like 2 dots right there. And Varroa actually ate all the Nemiopsis. This was like a positive story. It actually ate all the Nemiopsis, and the lake is like, I want to say almost back to normal. And they were actually researching whether to release Varroa or not, and then a boat accidentally released Varroa and took it out of their hands. And so problem, just thinking about what you know about ecology, what could be a problem of you've got this invasive species in the environment that's wreaking havoc on the environment. It's eating native species. It's growing like crazy, whatever. And then you release its predator into the environment. What is something that could maybe happen in that environment? A negative impact that maybe you wouldn't. Well, I mean, if they thought clearly, they would think that. But maybe a negative impact of introducing a non-native species to control an invasive species, like adding another non-native species to the environment. Okay, no, it's okay. Yeah, exactly. An even greater level of predation. They could eat things that they weren't expected to eat, right? They could eat other things. So the predator could eat other things. Right? That's exactly. It's just something as simple as that. they might not just eat what they're supposed to. They might eat something else because a lot of times they're animals, right? They don't know that that's what they're supposed to eat. They just eat whatever they can eat. So now they say discuss 2 specific characteristics of invasive species that enable them to thrive in new environments. So basically, I'm gonna write them down for you because it's a good list, and then it's something that you can kind of have to study a little bit for your test. So they're generalists, which means they eat lots of things. They're not really picky like the panda bear. They don't really care what they eat. Excellent dispersal mechanisms. They can move around really easily. Another thing they talk about is an R-selected species, which we'll get to this in the population unit, but it basically just means they have tons of babies. And they have their babies early. So these are the R-selected characteristics, basically like large clutch size, have babies early and often, okay, they have good defenses. So for example, like the lionfish has these like really poisonous spikes on its back, so there's not all that many things that can eat them. And superior predatory skills. So again, with that lionfish, if you've never seen one eat, you should watch a YouTube video. I'm sure there's a YouTube video somewhere of a lionfish eating. It has this, it's almost like a chameleon. It has this huge long, it just like, and it gets them like so fast. So it's a really efficient predator. So those are basically the main characteristics of why an invasive species is so successful in a new environment, which